welcome back to Content Marketing World Chatter. And again, we want to clear this up. It's chatter, not cheddar. So we apologize for any confusion. The FCC has called us several times on that, and there's no cheese involved here whatsoever. All right? So I just want to be clear about that. Brian Fanzo. Dude, do you know how hard it was to get you on the show, Broseph?
Oh, it can't be that hard. I'm excited to be here.
Millennial?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I don't have it on me now. It's in my bag.
It's getting recharged. It's
yes.
recharging.
Yeah.
Fanzo, the last time I emceed a conference, got to introduce you, and that was a while back, and I think you had, at that time, you'd been to about 65 different countries doing keynotes. What's the number?
76.
76 now?
76 now, yep.
Okay.
So 76. My goal was, a couple years ago when I left the government, I had to figure out all the countries. So like, it kind of sounds random to know how many countries you've been to. And that's how I kind of got the number. And I was like, ooh, there's a number I can start from. And I said, well, maybe I'll get to 100 countries by the time I turn 40. And I'm 38 now, so my runway for that is out. But maybe, you never know, I can take a big tour.
Okay, for those of you listening in Burma,
yes.
We would love it if you could hire Brian for a keynote. Maybe press the damn button. Or digital empathy.
Yeah,
digital empathy is what you're talking about mostly now. I think that's the last thing I see you speak about. Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm a tech guy to begin with. I love and believe in the power of social media. But I think for me, my background's in cybersecurity. I worked there for 9 years for the government, and the fundamental element has always been collaboration and community. And I think right now in this digital world, we have fake news and bad news. So how do you cut through the noise? And then at the same time, how do we ultimately move forward with so much innovation and technology? And I think a lot of people tell you have to unplug, we have to remove. And I think it's the wrong way because we can't continue to move forward. It's kind of like when you go on a vacation, you come back and you have all the emails stacked up, right? Unplugging for a short period of time gives you that short euphoria, but then when you come back, you have to kind of roll. And so I think a lot of what I focus on is how can we be better at using technology like AI or AR, VR to get to know people so that we can spend more time being human and use technology to make that connection. So it's not about more technology or removing technology, rather how can we be more empathetic? And then it kind of folds into press the damn button, which I even have the hat is on from that standpoint, where I believe empathy starts with me. And I think if we want to make a more empathetic world, we first have to allow people to be empathetic towards us. And so if every person started sharing more vulnerability, more transparently, I think we would start that movement. I think we always think about, wow, the world should be more empathetic, but how do we get to know people at that level? So it's a difficult one.
That's right. I don't want to do it. You start with that, and you never do it. And that, I learned in stand-up comedy, when you start opening up and sharing, a lot of comedy comes from pain.
Yep.
And when you start off as a comedian, I think a lot of people start off as a comedian, you write set up joke, whatever. Maybe that's funny, but it's not that interesting.
Right.
And then when you start sharing about your struggles and talking about, going to therapy and this, that, and the other thing, people that's when I noticed people would come up and talk to me, and then they'd share their story.
For sure.
And they would come up, somebody would stop me, and they know me.
Right.
And I'm like, what? Have we met? No, but I've seen you. And you realize this person has seen stuff. You've shared something with them that you've only shared with your therapist.
Right.
But it starts this, I think it starts something very beautiful.
It does.
A connection to being open. And most importantly, I think people feel like, hey, you know what? I'm not alone.
Right. And I think that's the biggest piece, right? And I think in a world that's more connected than we've ever been before, and I really, I say this, and I know the times that we're living are a little bit difficult, but I believe we're living in the greatest time in history because we have the ability to connect with people and share our stories. Yes. Suicide rates should be going down. We as marketers should not be alienating. We have all this data, we have all this information, we should not feel alone, yet we are going that wrong direction still. And I think a lot of that comes into this vulnerability and transparency. I think it's also when we start to realize that we all have more similarities than anything else. I was diagnosed ADHD at 31 years old, went through a divorce last 3 years ago. By sharing those stories, it's amazing, that connection. And I think we hear relatability. I loved, Tamsin talked about relatability on stage, Ann Hanley talked about it, Scott Stratton talked about trust. And I think those are those key elements. And I think we forget that social media, marketing, technology should enable us to do that at a bigger scale and do it more deeper. But I mean, at the core, we should definitely feel less alone and less isolated. And I think a lot of it comes from this putting ourselves out there and kind of embracing our own vulnerabilities.
Yeah. Man, you mentioned the divorce too. I remember a friend of mine from church was telling me, he said, yeah, man, I got divorced. I moved out to a townhome. And he said for the first year, it was just covered with paperwork and bills and, invoices that I couldn't get to.
Right.
And man, when I heard that, Brian, I was just like, oh my gosh, I had so much relief. And I just kind of accepted myself, because that's exactly what my townhome looked like. You know,
Right.
Just stuff stacked up, because you get too dang depressed to pick up the phone.
tackle any of that stuff. Yep.
Do anything, you know? And when you realize, wait a minute, I'm not the only person alone with this, then yeah, you don't, it's a beautiful thing.
It is, and I think business is the same way, right? It's a weird, like we see that beauty there, but I think even from a business perspective, more businesses that are embracing, like, let's face it, your logo and your brand itself. We don't trust a logo or a brand.
That's right.
You know, the study I did with IBM about trust of a brand, and it was funny. We were, like, one of the big things that, you and I have done work together in that space. The millennial Gen Z space, especially, when they hear something like "we've been in business 60 years," the first thing they think about is, oh, they're old, they're out of touch, they're gonna be slow to move, they're not gonna embrace me. Where that traditionally they were like, well, we use that as like our badge of honor. Like, we've been in business 60 years, and I think a lot of that is like, well, how do you become relatable? Like, and it is the people, right? Let's face it, if you're not empowering the people behind your brand, you're never gonna work. And I think I know why you're probably laughing. It was a very interesting study to get the results back in that organization. I'm like, wait a second, we use this as our staple, but I think it's kind of an eye-opening experience for a lot of people.
It is, and yeah, being in business for however long, that doesn't necessarily matter.
No.
I remember when I went. I think when I first joined IBM, I go to get my to get a cell phone. You know, and I said, yeah, we have a corporate plan with you guys. And there's some, probably a 20-year-old saying, okay, what's the name of the company? I said, it's IBM. So he's looking through this paper thing, and he's like, IBM. He says, is there a parent company? I'm like,
oh, that's a good one.
Well, he'd never heard of the company.
Yeah, for sure.
You know? And, just because you've been around for 100 years, you've done all these amazing things. The next generation coming up may not know and may not care.
For sure.
But if you can just start helping your people, the younger people at your company, feel free and have the freedom, and emotional safety to share themselves online, then all that changes.
And I think that we're finally getting at that time. Like, I'm getting most of the speeches, I'm getting full-time speaking as my full gig now. And a lot of companies now, before I feel like they were hiring me only from like marketing focus out, like, hey, here's our partners, our clients. Now I'm getting a lot more internal, like, hey, we want to help our leaders as well as our new hires tell their story, put themselves out there. And I think a lot of it's, it's baby steps. It is a little bit new, and I think especially for people that aren't used to putting certain things out there, I think we've had multiple discussions even in a couple of mastermind groups where it's like, hey, this is different. But once you see the magic, and for me, I've get letters almost on a weekly basis where someone will say, Brian, when you brought up about ADHD, it reminded me something about me that, and it might even not even be HD, like, hey, I was struggling with this, or my son had this, and I never realized that I wasn't alone, and I could start putting that out there. And I think that part of it is so magical, and I think for businesses now that they're empowering their employees, they're seeing the immediate return on that. And like, how are you going to compete with like the likes of Amazon and like the big old boys? It's put the people that make your brand great out there to the world and tell their stories.
Yeah. So what's one step that a brand could take now to encourage its employees to share, to be vulnerable online?
So I think the most important aspect is celebrating those that are already doing it.
Okay.
Because when you're trying to get people to do something different, sometimes awkward, and sometimes outside their comfort zone, it's very difficult to inspire them to do that unless they see others that are doing it getting rewarded. And the celebration, when I say that, some people are like, oh, well, I have to pay them. And you'll be amazed how much a LinkedIn like on a post from the CEO would work wonders for your employees, because your employees are like, oh my goodness, the CEO loved that I shared this story online. And something as small as that, where they go tell their coworkers, hey, I decided to post this on LinkedIn, this told my story about how I ended up at this company, the CEO liked it. That person is so much more likely to now be inspired to tell their story, rather than like a brand manager being like, we want you to tell your story. And so I think that's one of the big misconceptions is there's already people in every company pushing things out there, celebrate them. And then I think the other part of it is you have to kind of I always say, don't give rules, give swim lanes. So rather than telling people you have to talk about this, say, hey, these are the things we might not want you to talk about.
Yes.
These are things we would love for you to go, but don't feel obligated. And because it's a swim lane, like you're swimming, people don't feel like locked in. Like if you told them, you can't mention this and you need to make sure you mention the brand 4 times or whatever those type of things are, that immediately puts like this weird box into what people are doing.
That's right, and it creates fear, because it's like, once I hear rules like that, it's like, okay, I'm going to screw something up regardless. So if you're going to be that, that dictatorial about this stuff, then let me just not try. How can we find out about you and find out more about what you speak about and figure out a way to bring you in?
Sure. So, my speaking website, everything for speaking, is brianfanzo.com. I actually just launched a brand new website with Fable.com as the new content engine there. So, brand new site up and running. But I'm the founder of iSocialFanz, so I host 3 podcasts. Put out a lot of content, and so all of that is on iSocialFanz.com.
Yep.
And then I'm iSocialFanz everywhere. So with a Z at the end or a Z for those that are overseas, and search that on your favorite channel. I'm on every social network there is. I don't tell everybody to be on every network, but I'm there so I can help others. So I say pick your favorite one and give me a follow there. And I love the conversation. I think events like this are what I kind of live for, and it's exciting to be a part of it. So yeah, iSocialFanz and brianfanzo.com.
Awesome, man. Look, we usually don't do a PSA, but if you have the time and if you care about people, will you help this man get to 100 countries before he turns 40? That's all we're asking for you.
Yes.
Less than a cup of coffee a day. It can be done. Fanzo!
Tim, you're the man.
Thanks,
Appreciate
brother.
it. Cheers.
Thank you so much, man. Take care.
All right.